The night was quiet inside the colony station. Most workers had gone home hours ago. Only the cleaning light still glowed in the long metal halls. The janitor, a tired human named Daniel, finished wiping the last table in the empty dining area. He stretched his back, picked up his small bag, and sighed. Inside the bag was his simple dinner: a loaf of bread, a little cheese, and a flask of water. It was not much, but after a long day of sweeping corridors and scrubbing floors, it was enough. Daniel placed the bag down on the counter while he turned to lock up the storage closet. He heard nothing, only the hum of the old air vents. When he turned back, his heart skipped. The bag was still there, but the bread was gone. At first he thought maybe he was too tired and had forgotten it at another table. He searched quickly, under the counter, behind the chair, but the bread was nowhere. His brow tightened. Someone had taken it, but who? The dining hall was empty. He had been alone all evening. A faint sound reached his ears. It was not the hiss of the vents or the buzzing of the light. It was something softer, like the crinkle of paper or the rustle of cloth. Daniel froze and listened. There it was again, from the dark corridor that led toward the old supply tunnels. He took a cautious step forward. The corridor was half lit, the bulbs flickering with a weak glow. He carried his small lantern, swinging it gently. "Hello?" he called, his voice low. No answer. Only silence. Yet the feeling of being watched crawled across his skin. As he walked deeper, the sound came once more. Faster this time. It was the sound of tiny feet scraping against the metal floor. Daniel followed slowly. The air grew colder the further he went. This section of the station was rarely used now. Most workers avoided it, saying it was haunted by shadows of the past war. The lantern light reached a corner. Something small moved just out of sight. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He crouched low, raising the lantern closer to the floor. There on the metal ground were crumbs, fresh crumbs of bread. His bread, he felt, a strange pull in his chest. Who would risk stealing such a small thing? Unless they were truly desperate. Unless they were starving. His boots clicked softly as he followed the trail. The corridor grew darker until his lantern became the only light. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching long fingers across the walls. Daniel swallowed hard. He was not afraid of work, not afraid of dirt. But this silence, the kind that pressed against the ears, made his heart beat faster. At last, he reached the end of the corridor. A broken door leaned halfway open. Beyond it was an abandoned storage room. He stepped inside carefully. Dust covered most of the shelves, but in the far corner, behind a pile of broken crates, something shifted. Daniel raised the lantern higher. Two small, glowing eyes blinked. Back at him from the darkness, his breath caught in his throat. The figure was tiny, curled up, clutching the stolen bread tightly against a thin chest. It was a child, but not human. The skin shimmered faintly under the lantern glow, a pale blue tone with faint glowing lines running along the arms. Its face was sharp, almost fragile. With pointed ears and wide, frightened eyes, the child stared at him like a trapped animal. For a moment, neither of them moved. Daniel felt the heavy weight of silence pressing harder. The child's hands gripped the bread tighter, as if expecting him to snatch it back. Its lips trembled, but no words came. Daniel lowered the lantern slowly, so the light would not blind. The child, his heart ached at the sight. This was no thief planning mischief. This was someone hungry, someone scared. He thought of the whispers he had heard from the workers, rumors of alien children left behind after the war, hiding in forgotten corners of the station, children with no family, no home, no one to care. For them, now one of them sat before him, stealing his only dinner. The janitor felt torn. Part of him wanted to shout, to ask why, but another part of him, the deeper part, felt only sorrow, because in those glowing eyes, he did not see a thief. He saw fear, loneliness, and hunger. The lantern flickered and the child flinched as if the light itself would harm. Daniel softened his voice. "It's all right," he whispered. The child didn't move, didn't answer. The only sound was the soft chewing as it nibbled desperately at the bread. Each bite seemed like a fight against hunger itself. Daniel realized then, this was only the beginning. The missing bread was not just a lost meal, it was a doorway into a secret hidden in the shadows of the colony, and whatever truth waited there, it was far bigger than one stolen loaf. Daniel stood frozen at the doorway. The lantern in his hand trembled slightly, its glow stretching across the dusty room. The alien child's glowing eyes did not blink. They watched him with fear, sharp and wide, like a small animal cornered by a predator. The child's thin arms clutched the loaf tighter. Crumbs scattered down onto its legs. It chewed quickly, as if each bite might be the last before someone tore the food away. Daniel did not step closer. He knew one wrong move would send the child running deeper into the shadows. For a long moment, silence ruled the room. The only sound was the weak buzz of the lantern and the hurried munching of the bread. Daniel finally crouched slowly, lowering himself so his tall frame would not seem frightening. He set the lantern gently on the floor so the light softened between them. "It's all right," he said again, his voice calm, steady. But the child flinched, as though even gentle words could be dangerous. Daniel studied the small figure. The alien child could not have been more than 7 or 8 years old in human terms. Its skin, faintly glowing with silver blue lines, looked fragile. The clothes were torn rags, too thin for the cold air of the abandoned tunnels. Its hair was uneven, as if cut with broken glass or not cut at all, and the eyes, bright and unblinking, held both hunger and mistrust. Daniel's chest tightened. How long had this child lived like this, hiding in old supply rooms, stealing scraps to survive? He thought of the colony above. So many people passed through the station every day, yet no one had noticed this starving child in the shadows. Or maybe they had noticed and simply looked away. The child swallowed the last piece of bread and licked its fingers quickly. It still held the crust like treasure. Daniel reached slowly into his bag, careful not to startle. He pulled out the small wedge of cheese. He held it out at arm's length, placing it gently on the floor. Then he slid it forward across the dust. The child's eyes darted between him and the food. Its hands shook with need. At last, with slow, cautious movements, it stretched out and snatched the cheese, retreating back into the corner. Daniel did not move. He stayed crouched, letting the child eat. He could hear the small teeth working quickly. Every bite was filled with desperation. It hurt him to watch because this was not just hunger. This was survival, the kind of hunger that scars minutes past like hours. Finally, the child's chewing slowed. Its breathing evened out. The lantern's glow flickered across its face. For the first time, Daniel noticed more details. Scratches on the arms, thin scars across the knees, marks that looked too straight, too sharp to be from accidents. Someone had hurt this child before. Daniel's fists tightened, but he forced, his voice soft. "What's your name?" he asked. The child tilted its head slightly. No answer came, only silence. Perhaps it did not understand human speech, or perhaps it simply did not trust. Daniel tried again, tapping his chest lightly. "Daniel," he said, pointing to himself. "Daniel," he repeated slowly. Then he pointed gently toward the child. The child stared, its lips parting slightly. A soft sound came, broken and trembling. It was not clear, not in any human tongue, but it was a voice, fragile and small. Hearing it sent a shiver through Daniel's heart. The child quickly closed its mouth again, shrinking deeper into the corner. As if speaking had been a mistake, Daniel raised his hands, showing no harm. "It's all right," he whispered once more. The child's eyes flickered with confusion. Not trust yet, but something weaker than fear, a hesitation. The sound of the station groaned around them. Pipes rattled in the walls, vents sighed with tired breath. Daniel looked back toward the hall. If others discovered the child, what would they do? He knew the answer already. The colony did not care for strays, especially alien strays. Some would hand the child to slavers, others would drive it out to die in the cold. His jaw tightened. He could not walk away now. Not after seeing those eyes. But he also knew danger waited. Whoever had left scars on the child might still be looking. And if Daniel stayed in this room too long, he might not be alone for much longer. The lantern flickered low. The flame inside struggled against the stale air. Daniel picked it up slowly. He stood, keeping his distance so the child would not panic. "I'll come back," he said quietly. He was not sure if the child understood, but he wanted the words to stay, like a promise hanging in the air. As he stepped toward the door, he felt those glowing eyes following him. Not with trust, not with hope, but with a question. Why would a human not chase, not strike, not take back what was stolen? Daniel left the room with heavy steps, but his heart carried something new. The missing bread had led him to a mystery, and now the mystery had a face, small, hungry, and glowing in the darkness. And though he walked away, Daniel knew he would return. Because he could not forget those eyes in the shadows, and because something deep inside told him this was only the beginning. Daniel returned to his small quarters that night, but sleep did not come. The image of the glowing eyes haunted him. The way the child held the bread with shaking hands. The way its voice had cracked like glass when it tried to speak. It pressed on his chest heavier than any work he had done all day. He tossed on his narrow bed. The hum of the station's old machines filled the silence. Finally, he sat up, staring at the small piece of bread he still had left. It didn't taste right anymore. Every bite made him think of the child chewing desperately in the shadows. He pushed the food aside and whispered to himself, "That kid is starving." The next evening, after his long shift, Daniel returned to the tunnels. His bag carried more than usual, half of his weekly rations. He had saved them quietly, skipping his own meals. It meant his stomach growled now, but he didn't care. Something stronger than hunger pulled him back. The corridor was cold again, the air damp and heavy. Dust floated in the weak light of his lantern. He moved carefully, trying not to sound like a threat. When he reached the broken door of the storage room, he paused. The same pair of eyes shone faintly inside, waiting, watching. But this time the child did not run. It stayed curled in the corner, its gaze locked on the bag in Daniel's hands. Daniel crouched low and opened the bag slowly. He laid out what little he had. A few pieces of dried fruit, a heel of bread, and a small flask of water. He set them on the floor and slid them forward. The child's breathing quickened. Its small hands trembled as it reached out, snatching the food so fast it almost dropped it. The way it ate made Daniel's heart ache. The dried fruit vanished in seconds. The bread was torn apart as though the child feared it might disappear. The water flask was lifted, tilted, and drained in desperate gulps. Water spilled down its chin, but it kept drinking until the last drop. Daniel had never seen such hunger. It wasn't just eating. It was survival. A fight against an emptiness so deep that every bite was like gold. He stayed silent, letting the child eat in peace. The lantern light revealed more details this time. The child's thin arms, the scars, the hollow cheeks. Its stomach looked sunken. Every rib showed through the thin skin. Daniel's throat tightened. How long had this child lived like this? Weeks? Months? When the food was gone, the child curled back into the corner. It clutched the empty flask as if afraid it would be taken away. Daniel spoke softly. "More tomorrow," he said. The child tilted its head. Its lips parted slightly. This time a sound came, quiet, broken, but a word, not in human tongue, yet Daniel felt its meaning. A whisper of gratitude, small and unsure. He smiled faintly. "You're welcome," he whispered. His voice cracked. It surprised him how much emotion filled his chest. He was just a janitor, a man no one noticed. But here, in the shadows, he had become something more. The only lifeline for this fragile child. The child leaned its head against the wall, eyes heavy. Exhaustion pulled at its small frame. It looked ready to sleep right there. Daniel felt a protective instinct rise. He wanted to scoop the child up, take it somewhere safe. But he knew too well what would happen if anyone else saw. The colony authorities had no kindness for alien strays. He would lose his job, maybe worse. The child would be taken, sold, or thrown out into the cold, so he stayed a little longer, sitting cross-legged on the dusty floor. He watched as the child drifted into sleep. Its chest rose and fell softly. For the first time, it looked less like a frightened shadow and more like a child, just a child who needed warmth, food, and care. Daniel whispered into the still air, "You're not alone anymore." He wasn't sure why he said it, but the words felt right. They felt like a promise he could not break. When he finally stood to leave, he left the lantern dim, so the darkness would not swallow the child completely. His steps echoed down the corridor, but his mind stayed in that room, every detail carved into him. The trembling hands, the desperate chewing, the whispered word of thanks. Daniel knew then that he was already bound. The hunger he had seen was more than empty stomachs. It was the hunger of being unwanted, unseen, unloved, a hunger beyond words. And he could not turn away. Not now, not ever. The next night, Daniel carried more food than before. A small cloth bag filled with bread ends, a few dried vegetables, and a can of soup he had hidden from the kitchens. He walked carefully down the cold corridors, his lantern swinging softly. The shadows seemed deeper than usual. Every creak of the metal floor made him feel as if someone followed. When he reached the broken door, the glowing eyes were waiting. The child did not run this time. It stepped out slowly from behind the crates. Its bare feet tapped lightly on the dusty floor. The scars on its arms looked clearer under the lantern glow. Daniel felt his chest tighten again. He crouched low and opened the bag, laying the food on the ground. The child reached forward, snatched the bread and ate quickly, but this time it stopped halfway. Its eyes shifted nervously toward the darker end of the room, then back to Daniel, like it was trying to say something but no words came. Daniel followed its gaze. He noticed, for the first time, that the far wall was cracked. Behind the crates, a narrow opening stretched into darkness, almost invisible unless you knew it was there. The child pointed with one thin hand, a silent gesture. Then it disappeared into the crack like a shadow melting into the wall. Daniel hesitated. He should have turned back, but curiosity and worry pulled him forward. He squeezed through the narrow space, the lantern held low. The air inside was colder, thicker. Dust clung to his throat. The tunnel stretched far beneath the station. Its walls were lined with rusted pipes and broken wires. The child moved ahead quickly, like it knew every corner. Daniel followed carefully. His boots echoed softly. He saw signs of life scattered around. A broken toy carved from scrap metal, an old blanket torn into pieces, empty cans stacked neatly in a corner. This was not just a hiding spot. This was a home. The child had been living here, surviving on scraps and whatever it could steal. The tunnel widened into a larger chamber. Daniel's lantern revealed walls painted with strange marks, symbols glowing faintly, drawn with something that shimmered in the dark. The child placed a hand gently on one of the symbols. Its small fingers traced the glowing lines. Daniel realized with a shiver. These were not random drawings. They were memories, stories scratched on the walls by the child itself. He stepped closer. One set of symbols showed tall figures with glowing eyes, perhaps the child's family. Another showed fire falling from the sky, ships burning, people scattering. And then smaller shapes, figures running alone, hiding in caves. Daniel felt his throat tighten. This was the story of loss. The child's loss, carved in silence where no one could see. The child looked at him, eyes wide. Its lips moved, whispering something broken. A single word that sounded like, gone. Daniel's heart sank. He didn't need translation, he understood. The child had lost everything. It had been left here, abandoned in the aftermath of war, living in the tunnels while the rest of the colony moved on. He crouched low, his lantern throwing a soft circle of light. "You're safe," he whispered. But even as he said it, he heard another sound, a faint metallic clank echoing from far down the tunnel. The child froze, body tense, its glowing eyes widened with fear. Daniel's skin prickled. Someone else was here. He quickly covered the lantern with his hand, dimming the light. They waited in silence. The clank came again, closer this time. Boots on metal, heavy and slow. Daniel's heart pounded. The child backed against the wall, clutching his sleeve. It was shaking. Whoever was coming was not a friend. Daniel realized the truth. This was why the child lived in fear, why it hid so deep in the tunnels, because something, or someone, was hunting it. He whispered softly. "Stay quiet." The child nodded, pressing its hand to its mouth. Daniel's eyes scanned the shadows. The tunnel stretched like a maze. If he was careful, they could slip away unseen, but if the lantern gave them away, it would be over. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. Silence. Only the sound of Daniel's own heartbeat filled his ears. He knew they had little time. He leaned close to the child and whispered, "We have to move." The child gripped his hand tightly, for the first time willingly. Together they slipped deeper into the tunnels, away from the sound. As they disappeared into the dark, Daniel knew one thing for certain. The missing bread had led him here. The glowing eyes had shown him a child's hunger. But now he had uncovered something far greater. Secrets of the abandoned tunnels. Secrets that someone wanted hidden. And in protecting the child, he was stepping into a danger he could not yet see. The tunnels felt endless. Cold air rushed through the broken pipes, carrying echoes like whispers. Daniel moved slowly, holding the lantern low so its glow would not travel far. The child's small hand clung tightly to his sleeve. Its glowing eyes darted to every shadow. Every sound made it flinch. Behind them, the footsteps had gone quiet, but Daniel knew silence could be worse than noise. Silence meant someone was listening. Someone was waiting. They stopped at a bend where the tunnel split in two. One path sloped upward toward the main station. The other twisted deeper into the darkness. The child tugged his arm, pulling him away from the upward path. It shook its head quickly, whispering a single word in its own broken tongue. Daniel didn't understand the language, but he understood the fear. Whoever had been following them, that path led straight to them. They slipped into the deeper tunnel. The walls here were cracked and wet. Water dripped steadily from rusted pipes above. The air smelled of mold and old smoke. Daniel kept his steps soft, but the echo of his boot still carried. He cursed himself for not being lighter. The child moved like a shadow, barefoot and silent. As they walked, Daniel noticed the child glancing at the walls. Symbols glowed faintly, scratched deep into the metal. He had seen some before in the chamber, but here they stretched in long lines like warnings carved for anyone who entered. The child touched one mark and whispered again. This time Daniel heard the tone, sad, broken. It was speaking of danger, of those who hunted. Daniel crouched to meet its eyes. "Who's after you?" he whispered. The child only shook its head. Tears glimmered faintly in the glow of its skin. It tried to speak, but no words came clear. Instead, it placed a hand against its own arm, where scars crossed the skin. Then it pressed two fingers to its lips and made a sharp cutting motion through the air. Daniel understood. Whoever hunted this child had heard it before, and if they found it again, they would silence it forever. The lantern flickered. The flame hissed low. Daniel covered it quickly with his hand. In the distance, the faint metallic clank returned. Boots again, slow and steady. The sound bounced along the tunnel walls. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. As if whoever followed was enjoying the chase, Daniel's heart raced. He looked down at the child. Its small body trembled. Its glowing eyes begged him to run. But if they ran too fast, the echo would give them away. He squeezed the child's hand and whispered, "Quiet now. Just breathe." They moved along the tunnel edge, Daniel's lantern dim, the glow of the child's markings softly lighting the path. It was almost haunting, like the child carried its own lantern beneath its skin. After minutes that felt like hours, they reached another chamber. This one was larger, filled with broken machinery. Old cargo crates lay scattered across the floor. The child darted behind one, pulling Daniel with surprising strength. They crouched low. Daniel blew out the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Only the faint glow of the child's markings remained. The footsteps entered the chamber moments later. Heavy boots scraped against the floor. A man's voice cursed under his breath. Daniel dared not move. The child buried its face against his arm. Shaking, the man's shadow passed across the crates, close. Too close. Daniel held his breath until his chest burned. Finally, the sound of boots faded into another tunnel. The hunter had moved on. For now, Daniel exhaled slowly. The child lifted its face, eyes wet. Its lips moved, whispering in broken fragments. This time, Daniel caught pieces of words. Not full, but enough. Slavers. Taken. Escape. The truth struck him hard. This child had been captured before, sold like a thing, not a life, and it had escaped into the station's shadows, hunted ever since. The scars on its arms told the rest of the story. Daniel felt anger burning in his chest, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. He clenched his fists. He was no soldier, no fighter, just a janitor. But he could not let them take this child again. Not while he breathed. He leaned close, his whisper fierce but soft. They won't get you, not while I'm here. The child blinked. For the first time, its eyes held something different, not just fear, but a spark. The smallest flicker of trust, Daniel knew then that everything had changed. The missing bread had led to a secret child. The tunnels had revealed symbols of loss. And now the whispers of danger had shown him the truth. This was no accident. He had stepped into a fight he never wanted, but one he could not turn away from. The slavers were still out there, hunting, waiting. But Daniel had already made his choice. He would protect this child, even if it meant facing the shadows head-on. The chamber was silent after the hunter's boots faded, but Daniel knew silence never lasted long. Shadows clung to every wall. The air itself felt heavy, waiting for danger to strike again. The child gripped his hand tightly, its glowing eyes wide with fear. Daniel whispered, "We have to move, now." He picked up the lantern but kept it unlit. The child's faint markings were enough to guide them through the dark. They slipped into another tunnel, the metal walls cold against Daniel's arm as he brushed past. Every drip of water, every groan of the pipes sounded louder than before. He kept glancing back, afraid that at any second the echo of boots would return. Then it did. A sharp metallic clank behind them, boots pounding against the tunnel floor. Not one pair this time. Several. The hunters were back, and they were not alone. Daniel's pulse thundered. "Run!" he whispered. The child darted forward, light on its bare feet. Daniel followed as fast as he could, his boots heavy, echoing too loudly. But there was no choice now. The tunnel twisted left, then right. The hunters' voices carried through the dark. "Don't let it get away," one shouted. Their words chilled Daniel's blood. They weren't even trying to hide their intent. They wanted the child alive, but for chains. Not mercy. The child sprinted ahead. Its glowing markings lit the path like streaks of silver fire. Daniel pushed his legs harder. The lantern swung wildly in his hand, though still unlit. Behind them, the boots grew louder. Closer. They reached a junction. 3 tunnels split before them. Daniel froze for a second too long. The hunter's shouts echoed closer. The child tugged his sleeve, pulling him toward the left. Trusting the child, he followed. The narrow tunnel forced them to run single file, their breaths loud in the cramped space. A shadow moved ahead. Another hunter. Daniel's heart lurched. They were surrounded. The child gasped and stumbled back into him. The hunter raised a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dark. It blinded Daniel for a second, but instinct kicked in. He swung the lantern like a weapon, smashing it against the hunter's arm. The glass shattered, sparks flying. The hunter cursed and dropped the light. "Go," Daniel shouted. The child darted past the fallen man. Daniel followed, his heart pounding. Behind them, more shouts, angry, furious. The chase was no longer just footsteps in the dark. It was chaos. They ran into another chamber, this one wide and filled with rusted machines. Pipes dripped water into shallow pools on the floor. The echoes of their steps splashed across the chamber. The child skidded to a stop, looking around wildly. No clear way forward. Daniel grabbed its hand and pulled it toward a narrow ladder leading upward. "Climb," he ordered. The child obeyed, scrambling up quickly. Daniel followed, his muscles straining. Below, the hunters stormed into the chamber. Lights swept across the walls. "Up there!" one of them shouted. Bullets ricocheted off the ladder, sparks flying. Daniel pressed himself flat, shielding the child with his body. The noise was deafening in the enclosed space, but the child kept climbing. Daniel pushed himself upward, rung by rung. Every muscle burned, but he would not stop. At the top of the ladder, they squeezed into another tunnel, this one even tighter. Daniel's shoulders scraped the walls as they crawled forward. The child led the way, its glowing markings faint but steady. Behind them, the hunters' voices cursed, too big to fit quickly into the crawl space. For now, they had a small lead. The crawl space opened suddenly into a high platform overlooking a cavernous chamber. Below, old machinery hummed faintly. The sound covered their breathing. Daniel pulled the child close, crouching low. For a moment they were hidden. For a moment there was silence. Daniel's chest heaved. His body shook with exhaustion. The child pressed against him, its small frame trembling but still holding his sleeve tightly. Its eyes met his. For the first time he saw not just fear but trust, a silent plea. "Don't let go," Daniel whispered. "I won't." He realized then that he had already made his choice. This chase was not only about escaping, it was about protecting something precious, something the hunters would never understand. The echoes of boots returned, shouts filled the chamber below, lights swept across the platform. The hunters were relentless. The chase was not over, it was only beginning. Daniel gritted his teeth. He pulled the child to its feet, his voice low but steady. "We'll get through this." The child nodded, its eyes still glowing, fierce despite fear. Together they slipped into another passage. The shadows closed around them again. The chase continued, but now Daniel felt something new. Not just fear, but fire. Because he knew he would fight the darkness itself before he let the hunters take this child away. Daniel's legs burned as he pushed forward. The tunnels twisted endlessly. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound carried the hunters' voices behind them. But still he kept running. Still he held the alien child's small hand tight. Because letting go was no longer an option. They stumbled into another chamber, this one larger than the rest. Broken machines lined the walls. Pipes hissed with escaping steam. It was a dead end. The only exit was the tunnel they had come through, and now heavy boots thundered closer. The hunters had cornered them. The child pressed against Daniel's side, its glowing eyes wide with terror. Daniel's heart pounded. He had no weapon, no plan, only his body and his will to protect. He stepped in front of the child, facing the darkness where the hunters approached. Voices echoed first, sharp and cruel. "There it is. Don't let it slip again." Flashlights cut through the shadows. Beams of light struck Daniel's face, then dropped to the child. Hungry smiles spread across the hunter's lips. Daniel spread his arms wide, blocking their view. "You're not taking the child," he said. His voice shook, but his stance was firm. The hunters laughed. One stepped forward. "You're just a janitor," the man sneered. "You can't stop us." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Maybe I'm just a janitor," he said. "But tonight, I'm the wall between you and this child." The hunters raised their weapons. The air grew colder. The child whimpered softly, clutching Daniel's sleeve. For a moment, everything hung in silence. Then chaos exploded. The hunters lunged forward. Daniel grabbed a broken pipe from the floor. He swung it with all his strength. Metal crashed against metal, sparks flying. The child darted behind the machines, hiding in the glow of steam. Daniel fought like a man who had nothing to lose. Every strike of his pipe was fueled by anger, by the image of scars on the child's skin, by the sound of its starving whispers. He took blows to his arms, his chest, but still he stood. Still, he swung. The hunters cursed. They had expected fear. Instead, they found fire. One by one, they stumbled back. Steam hissed, filling the chamber. The glow of the child's markings cut through the fog like a star. The hunters shouted, confused. Their lights flickered, their courage cracked. Daniel's voice roared over the noise. "You will not hurt this child again." The words echoed like thunder in the tunnels. The hunters faltered. Some turned, retreating into the shadows. The rest cursed and stumbled after them. Soon their boots faded, swallowed by the maze of corridors. Silence returned. Only the hiss of steam remained. Daniel dropped the pipe. It clanged against the floor. His chest heaved, every muscle screaming, but he was still standing. He turned, searching. "Kid?" he called softly. The child stepped out from behind the machine, its eyes wide, tears glowing on its cheeks. It ran to him, tiny arms wrapping around his waist. Daniel froze for a moment. Then slowly, gently, he placed a hand on its back. The child trembled, but it did not let go. Not this time. For the first time, it clung to him not out of fear, but out of trust. Daniel's throat tightened. He whispered, "It's all right now. You're safe." He knew it wasn't fully true. The colony might not understand, the hunters might return. But something had changed tonight. He wasn't walking away. Not ever. They left the tunnels together, the child holding his hand. The colony lights felt too bright after the darkness. People stared at him as he walked through the station halls, a battered janitor with a glowing alien child at his side. But Daniel didn't care. Let them whisper. Let them question. He would not hide this child again. News spread quickly. A human janitor had stood against slavers to protect an alien orphan. Some laughed, some doubted, but others listened. Others saw the truth in the child's glowing eyes. And slowly, whispers of kindness began to ripple through the colony. That night, when Daniel sat in his small quarters, the child curled beside him, wrapped in the only blanket he had, its breathing steady, its small frame finally at rest. Daniel stared at the ceiling, exhausted, but his heart was full. He had not just saved a child. He had saved himself. The missing bread had led to shadows. The shadows had revealed hunger, pain, and danger. And through it all, Daniel had found something he never expected. A purpose, a bond, a family. As he drifted into sleep, the child's hand still clutched his sleeve. Daniel smiled faintly. He was just a janitor. But to this child, he had become a guardian, a protector, and maybe, just maybe, a father. His life would never be the same again, because one stolen loaf of bread had changed everything, and a heart once tired and unnoticed was now a heart changed forever.